Hello and welcome to my live painting demo on this Tuesday night. Tonight I am painting a young man that I had painted 3 years ago, and I had painted it through an app called Sketchy. And part of that, sorry, I'm just wiping my hands. Part of that is, if anyone's familiar with Sketchy, it's an app where people post family shots, headshots, selfies, etc. And artists join the app and do paintings and drawings from them. And this is one that I did from that app. And 3 years ago, I'd been working really hard on my portrait painting skills since then. And so each year on the anniversary of when I started using the app, I do something called Sketchiversary. I do a painting of one of my original paintings, and um, and that helps me see the progress that I've made. Um, so tonight I'm painting. It's maybe the one of the first 10 um, sketchy paintings that I had done, and you can see in the corner of the view is the one that I had done 3 years ago, and this one. I put a few different options in my Instagram account for my followers to choose from, and this is the one they thought I should do a repaint of. Um, Not necessarily a comment on the quality of the original painting, but more that they were interested in seeing me paint this one in my my current style, I guess, or with the skills that I have now. So I'm just sort of lightly putting in where I think landmarks are. I'm just sort of getting a little bit of the gesture. Then I'm going to start to measure a little bit. I'll wipe out some of those initial marks and I'll go from there. I see that Marion has joined in. It looks like there's about 5 people that have joined so far. And she says, "Hello, I really love the information on Instagram." Well, thank you. Um, and I don't know if you're doing the 100-day portrait challenge, but even if not, then you're still getting that information that I'm posting there. And but mostly that information I'm putting together for the people in the challenge so that they have some tips to go by to help them improve as they go along. And so far, that there's been a very positive reception to um, that information and the challenge. And I'm actually kind of surprised by how many people have joined the challenge. It initially was a challenge to one person, a 14-year-old girl who wanted her parents to take her more seriously as an artist. And she wanted me to promote her page, to follow it, and to tell other people to follow it. And I went there, and there was 7 posts. Not all of them were artwork. And so I made the challenge as a way to get her to take herself more seriously in a way, or at least challenge herself a bit. And a few other people saw the information, the challenge. I was sort of offering it as like, if you do this challenge, then I will um, follow your page, and I'll tell other people to follow. What I basically said was that I would take your first and last um, paintings or drawings from the challenge, and I would post them as a before and after on my page with your information. Unfortunately, she didn't take me up on it. She said her parents are forcing her to work full time in their business. She's 14, so it's a little bit like child labor, I guess. But and that she didn't have time to do the artwork. And I kind of felt like, if it's really important, you have the time regardless. But she may also be being pressured to her parents not to do artwork. Okay, so let me start getting some measurements going. So I'm measuring from the top of the panel to the lower eyelid. So I see. So isn't that interesting? Where I drew the eyes, this is where the eyes fall in the panel. Let me Let me put some inch markers, make sure I have this thing the right size. It does look like the right size. Just when my drawing is so far off from the actual measurement, then I start to get a little nervous. I did a whole painting once on the wrong size panel, and it wasn't until the drawing started to get really strange that I decided to stop and measure, and sure enough, the painting was supposed to be an 8 by 10, and I was painting on a 12 by a 9 by 12 panel, and so it got really strange. And anyway, so my coworker Angela's here. Hi, Angela, welcome. And she comes on occasionally, watches me paint. So let me start to take some measurements and really move things around. So that's where the eye is. So much for laying things, sort of eyeballing it. Okay, because I am using the panel as part of my measurement, and so it all has to be the right size in relationship to the panel. So if that's where the eyes are, then the hairline, see, that's where I'm going wrong, is the hairline's up here. Do you know what I'm going to have to do is, because I made so many marks and I now have trouble seeing my drawing, I'm just going to mix a little bit of his halftone flesh tone color, just kind of orangey red. It looks like his forehead is starting to go into shadow, so I'm going to mix a little bit of a darker color and just start to clean this up a little bit so I can see where I am. Not to really get into any details, but just to kind of knock this back. You know, it's sort of non-sequential here, but this is what I have to do at the moment to see it. And sometimes I do go in straight with the paint, no, not even any indication marks, and just do large general shapes. And that's another way of painting. Absolutely no drawing when you do it that way. Just getting a little more. Yep, okay, so not so far off. I can start to indicate where his hair is now that I know where his hairline is. At some point I'll get some of those beautiful curls going. And I think in the original painting I did do quite a bit of brush play to get those locks of hair looking right. Then I'm going to just come right down the nose here and then find the bottom of his nose. So that's another measurement. I'm going to measure from the bottom, assuming that my panel is the right size. Oh, hold on. There. So that looks about right. I'm going to find the center line of his nose is here. So another direction that I'm off on my drawing. So if the center line of his nose is there, then I have to make sure his hair mass is in the right place too. That seems to be correct. So now I'm beginning not to trust my judgment on just eyeballing the placement here. Once I get a little bit further into that, then I do trust my drawing skills in terms of figuring out where the face is. So this is the nose is here, then the eyes, eyebrows, just really lightly indicating. And then I'm going to come back in, and once I get the location of one eye, I might really start to slow down and get some detail, because that's what I've been doing lately, is just starting to get really detailed in one area and work my way out, because I sort of came in really fast with the drawing tonight. I wasn't able to do that. I should have done a little bit of measuring first. Let's just get a little bit of that reflected light in the side of his face there. Okay. And once I see if I can get the measurement of one of these eyes, and then I can start working from there. Let me see, look at my feed for a second. So Azumaz is here from Nigeria. Thanks for all the Instagram tips. Great challenge. Watching with keen interest. Um, Let me get this. Of course, YouTube is throwing ads in my face as I'm trying to read this. Um, Caridad from Quito is here. She's a tattoo artist, and she's watching tonight. And I think she's starting to join the challenge too. Welcome, bienvenidos or bienvenida. Um, Marion Glazer says, "So happy you show how to make corrections." And Ozio Maz says, "Great insight on correct measurements." Okay, so I'm all caught up. You can keep on asking, keep on posting, keep on asking questions, and I will try to answer them the best I can as I am painting. And don't mind at all. It's I paint with one side of my brain and I talk with the other, and usually that works out pretty well. Okay, here's where the ear is, more or less. I said I was going to get the measurement of that eye, so let's get a long enough brush. So, corner of the eye is good. The other corner, let me make sure my whole photo is in the picture. The other corner of his right eye. That's funny. Look how far over it is. All right. Okay, so that's about like that. Let me get a measurement from the top again. Well, let me get the Photoshop toolbar out of the way. Move. I've got two monitors and not enough room for all the applications I have open. Let me see. Corner of the eye. Let's do it right to where his eyelashes are, where it is the darkest, right there. Okay. And then I want from the top down to the bottom lid. Oh, bumping the camera there. Can't really get there that easily overhand. Let me try underhand, because I got my camera in the way and I'm starting to bump it. Okay, and so I want the eye just a tad higher. Not that much. I think it's actually pretty good. Okay, so from there I'm going to start to do his eyelids. Really want to start to feel the form as I paint it. That includes building up the values and color as I go. So I have that indentation, the lower eyelid, it's kind of black with a little bit of red in it. I can use a pretty thick brush because I can come back in with paint and thin out that line. You don't always have to use a detailed brush to get detail. Um, if you paint it in sort of an order, in the right order, then you can get really accurate details with a fairly big brush. Also, keeping hold of a big brush as you work is it's a good way to keep the painting looking fresh. When you start making thousands of little stabs at it um, to get detail, sometimes um, the painting starts to look a little stiff. You don't really see that gorgeous brushwork anymore. So as much as I can, I like to hold on to a big brush. Sometimes I get seduced into using a smaller brush. I'll be trying to get little details into something that's already mostly painted, and I'll have a little brush in my hand, and before I know it, I'm painting the whole painting with that same brush. And then I have to scream, drop the brush, run out of the room, and then come back and grab a bigger brush. And so that's that's the story of the brush. So if I can hold on to a big brush for as long as I can, then that doesn't happen to me. Okay, so I'm painting that little bit of where this the brow turns into the dark a little bit, and then have um, actually have that light coming in tighter. That's one thing I notice that I do. One of my weaknesses is that where there's lots of small complicated shapes, I'll tend to spread them out instead of keeping them really compact, and then my drawing starts to get off because of that. And so I really have to make an effort to make sure that I keep to the boundaries and force that information in, keep it in the space that it's in. So that's sort of what I'm doing now, is I'm trying to pull some of that stuff back. Let's get that the values in the forehead a little bit closer as I go. So as I move away from that eye and start to nail the values, then you'll see the face start to emerge from that. But I have to get at least most of the colors right as I move away. It's not quite there yet, but it will in a few minutes, and you'll start to see what I mean. Okay, and this pulls down. I got a little bit of a dark orange. That's permanent orange mixed with a little bit of black, touch of the naphtha red, just to pull it over to the red a little bit that I see in the corner of that eye. And I have just a touch too much black in that, so let's lighten it up, get a little more red in there. That's better. And then we got some of that red coming from the lower eyelid. And I really want to think about this shape. As this moves towards the side of the face, it starts to recede, move away from us rather quickly. So, and there's a few things in the photograph that I see that help us see that. I want to keep that in the painting. It's real easy to flatten out when you're working from a photo by missing some of those little things. So I have a little bit of a light edge towards the side of his face where it's catching a little more light, and that's telling us that that's facing even further away from us. I got a little bit of a blue color that's catching a different color light there too. So I want to get that in. And then I have a little bit of a soft edge between that color that's in the frontal part of his face and the almost white that's on the side. So that little bit of a soft edge is also going to help turn the form. And I want to get some of the color that's coming into the ear. So if I look at his eyebrow, which may be a tad lower, and then relationship to his ear, the top of the ear is actually coming to where that lower tip of the eyebrow is. So I've made his ear too high, so I can come back in with hair right here, knock the um, knock where the ear is a little bit lower, and then I can put in the recess in his ears, that dark. I want to put a little bit of alizarin crimson in there, keep it nice and red, but a bit of black so it's not doesn't have too much intensity. There's a little bit of intensity here in this. I forgot what the name of this little channel is, but it's more red there. And this really is the edge of his ear here. I don't want to go too far out. That's another tendency I have. Make keep on pushing the ears further and further out from the face instead of keeping it tight. So have to work on that. And then he has a little bit of apple cheeks going on here. So I want to make sure I get that. It's being pushed out by that really forceful smile. And I get a little bit of orange outlining his cheek shape. And then I have white on the top of the cheek, a little white mixed with some of the color on the cheek there. And so that's going to help make that strong shape. And then it gets darker again as it's in that recess, the corner of his cheek there, the corner of his mouth. And then we almost go to black here. And we have that nice swooping shape of his mouth and lower lip there, just indicating. And I want to measure to find his chin. Again, I don't think I have it in the right place. If everything else is right, then that chin is too high. Yep. So the chin is going to be down here, more or less. And then I have the dark underneath on the neck. So I already know that's going to be close to black. I'm just going to go ahead and indicate it so I can start to see where that stuff is. And as I got a little bit of the white paint in that shadow there. I want to try to eliminate as much of that as possible so that it doesn't corrupt the color there. If I want it to go really dark, and see if I can avoid painting any color where putting any paint down right now where his teeth are, because those are really white, bright in the photo, and I want to keep them close to that way. In the minute that I start putting in some color, it's going to be hard to get back um, to that bright white. And okay, we got a couple more comments. Hello again, AJ from Atlanta. That's Rishi. Do you practice fat over lean? Could you talk a little bit about that if you do? Thanks. I do. Not so much. A lot of painters talk about that as for the health of the painting, and it is a way to keep the painting from cracking. I rarely have any problems with my paint cracking, or problems with, in some cases, people have problems with the paint actually falling off the painting when they do painting with too many thin layers and there's not enough paint binder. Then sometimes the paint breaks, the film of the paint breaks, and it isn't really stable enough. I have only had one painting that I've had crack, and that's because I did one painting and I didn't like it, and then I decided to paint over that painting, which had a fair amount of thick paint, and do another painting over that. And what happened was that, and I put down some washes over that very thick paint, and that those washes ended up cracking. Um, and unfortunately, it's one of my favorite paintings. It was of my wife posing for me. She was sleeping, reading a book, and has just a really nice feel to it. I still have it in my bedroom. It was painted 25 years ago. It's held up pretty well, except that it's cracked all over the place. And so, other than that painting, I haven't had any problems. But generally, if you think about it, you have most control over the painting if you start off with light washes, because it's easy to paint over a wash. What's hard is if you have really thick paint down and you want to paint a significantly different color, then that thick paint really becomes difficult to overcome. And so just out of practice, I don't tend to paint very thick in the beginning. I just want to have a fair amount of control and the ability to change my decisions as I go. So I start to get thicker towards the end when I can start to commit more, and that's generally only in the light area of the painting. I tend to keep the darks fairly transparent, with a few exceptions, but all my dark colors are transparent colors. They start off as transparent, and so I can keep them thin washes and keep on adding more and more paint until those darks get as dark as I want them to be. And um, and so the whole painting overall, I am just naturally working from thinner paint that's either thinned with Gamsol, which is a mineral spirit, odorless, made by Gamblin, or I use safflower oil, which is the binder in some of the paints that I have. Some people would say linseed oil. It's very similar, and the effect of that is that not only does it strengthen, um, it adds binder to the paint, so it makes the painting stronger overall. But but it also allows the painting to dry slower. So if I want to continue to work wet into wet over a few days, that helps with that. Although I really don't have that much problem um, coming back in and painting into a painting that's already dry. I know some artists that do find that challenging, and I don't as much. I thought I made that lower lip too high because there wasn't room for the teeth, but I may have made this where the upper teeth end just a little bit too low too. So, and I can play with those as I go. But I think I do need to pull that lip just a little bit lower. Started to come in too high in the corners. So I'm going to just adjust that. I don't have to be very exact right now. I can come in later and make some adjustments there. Oil paint is a very forgiving medium if you know how to use it, and a lot is working thinly to begin with, and then you're able to move paint around. Um, I like, when I say thinly, I paint, mix my paint, thin my paint to the consistency of cream, or kind of a milky consistency. That's how I generally like to paint most of the painting, and then I come in thicker later, and it gives me the most control. It doesn't give me quite that gorgeous impasto if I did the whole thing with thick paint, but sometimes that starts to look a little bit, um, I don't know what the word is, just a little bit techniquey, or it does start to look a little bit dated, because that whole impasto painting that became this very popular art decor style of European, kind of fake European cities painted in thick paint. Um, that whole style is now starts to look dated. So I really reserve the thicker paint for where it makes sense in my painting, and not try to do the whole painting in that kind of impasto style. I don't know if that makes any sense. Anyway, I hope I hope that answered the question. It was kind of rambling. I kind of lost what the question was. I think it was, do I paint fat over lean? But I think I answered 40 other questions in there. Okay, so if I have the eye ending here, and then I have just a little bit of space here where that side of the cheek is, I'm just going to come in a little bit tighter than I have. This is where I said I tend to push things out a little bit. And yeah. I also, one of my bad habits is I tend to skew a little bit. I push the top half of the painting to the left, and I push the bottom half to the right. And the features on the right, I tend to drop down lower. So the overall effect is that everything will look a little bit out of whack unless I'm really conscious of it and fix it as I go along. And I think everyone does that. I think there's this the natural tendency. It's almost like a right-handedness or something like that, the brain tends to want to see things um, sort of more over to one side, and so that's why it's like really hard to draw an ellipse if you see like a coffee cup on a table and you're trying to draw the top of it, and it's really hard to get that shape right. I've seen some people who do it very well, like Carol Marine, who works in more um, faceted strokes, and she kind of measures out with like almost octagonal shapes where she can see across the axis of the oval as she works, because um, it's so broken down into line segments that it's much easier for her to get those right. But generally, it's really hard to draw and paint those kind of shapes and get them right. Um, I know whenever I've had to paint a fountain that has like those kind of concentric circles and get it in perspective, it's really hard. Let me get the outer edge of his cheek there. Make sure I have that out far enough. And I'm not getting his the right amount of indentation here in the cheek, something like that. And I can measure looking going across. So he has this indentation here that's right about the level of the bottom of the nose, goes across, and he has the same thing on this side. So if I keep an eye on that, let's get the little bit of white that's coming in here and that indentation, and then the red that's in the cheek breaking into that. Okay, and then I got this other eye here that I need to make sure also that it's in the right place before I get too far. Sometimes I'll know it looks right and I don't have to worry about it too much, but it's the hardest thing to get eye shapes to line up that feel like they're in the right place. I'm just going to make it a tad higher. So you can see like how wacky the eyebrows look right now. So I know I need to lower that one. And I just mixed totally the wrong color. So right above that eyebrow is sort of a little bit darker orange red color there. But I have to lower that eyebrow. And then I can come in with a darker purple red color that's above that. Here, and I'm trying not to do too much blending. I want to come back in with paint where the colors change instead of just trying to blend my way into it, and that will make a much more aesthetic painting and will look not overworked if I am really diligent about getting enough paint on the brush each time I come back in. And then that gives me a little more control because I can pick the color that I'm going to put down there instead of trying to somehow get the colors that are already down to end up being the right color. Okay, and I'm getting close enough to the colors and values and shapes that I can start to look back and forth between my resource and the painting and start to compare things so that I can see where things aren't quite matching up. And the idea isn't to have a perfect copy of the photo, but it's really useful to the photo is a reference, and it's a reference of where the anatomy is and where the likeness comes from and a lot of those things. And so you do have to match a certain percentage of the reference for to be able to get a lot of those things. So where you're painting significantly off from the photo, you have to decide, well, do you want it to be, or is that just from poor drawing? And so for me, it's usually from poor drawing. Occasionally, I'll ended up distorting a face, distorting the features, and I end up liking it more than the photo, and I'll just go ahead and keep it. And in that case, it may have started off as poor drawing, but if you're making deliberate decisions about it, um, then that becomes a very decisive part of the painting, and in a way kind of a happy accident that you've decided to hold on to. Let's keep those darks coming, and we got a little bit of some pinkish colors in here, purples. So this is a little bit of dioxazine purple that I'm putting in. It's got a little bit too much of the red in it right now to match the reference, and I need to go a tad lighter. There we go. And if I do this right, then you'll really feel that shininess on his forehead. I was thinking about maybe coming in with a little more purple that it's in the photo, but I'm really liking the colors that are coming through in it right now. And this highlight is one place where I can come in with much thicker paint. It makes sense from from a painting perspective. You want to draw more attention. You're creating some texture with the paint and building up that white, so it just really feels like the light is really bouncing really hard on it, and that kind of thick impasto paint in that regard really helps you get that kind of light effect. So, and pulls the eye in. If you want it to be a focal point, that's a really good way to do that, is by creating a lot of texture with the paint. And let me see, I may have missed some comments. I lost my place here. Do I practice lean over fat? So Azumaz says, I hate drawing teeth, and I tend to avoid with the challenge. I'm getting more confident. Great demo. One thing about teeth is you can just paint them as just one group, or you can pick out individual small light shapes that are on the teeth, but I tend to try to keep them as simple as possible. I've been working on a portrait recently. It's a family portrait of four people, and everyone in the portrait is smiling, showing their teeth. And I've been spending a lot of time making their teeth look right. Um, and I have been painting the individual teeth and really working on getting the shapes right. So it's really tough to get those look right. One thing you want to do is the teeth, and maybe in this case they're very close to white, but in general they're not going to be white. And especially in the sides of the mouth where the teeth start to move out of the light, you want to make sure that you're going grayer or darker color as you move to the sides. His teeth go a little bit bluer, a little bit darker and bluer towards the sides, and so I can come in with a little bit of blue and get those. And then I do want to keep, I've maybe painted his teeth a little bit too red, picking up some of the lip color, so I can come in with some blue and get at least some of these side teeth starting to look the right color, and then I can come in and whiten the blue here. I wanted to sort of change the hue a little bit, and then when I come back in with white on top of that, then at least it will be picking up the right color from the paint underneath. Might be smart to dip back into the blue here again. And then each one here, his teeth here are very separated, so to really get the right feel, I am going to have to paint them as individual paint brush strokes instead of just coming across. And I may have to do a better job of measuring their position, but I'm just kind of putting them in quickly where I think they're going to be. And that may end up feeling right, even if they're not perfect. I haven't decided about how precise I'm going to be in this painting. I do know that I want it to feel like I have a little more control in this one than I did in the original one. Sorry, 3 years ago. I was about to say 4 years ago, but 3 years ago. Getting a little bit of purple in here in the shadow. So I'm using that to get actually the dark a little punchier, get a little more color in it. And I see his tooth, his mouth shape is actually a little straighter here, so I'm just coming back in with a little more white and adjusting that, and then it's a little bit higher on that side, on this side right here. Okay, let's give his nose a little more definition. I did actually, it's not too far off. I came in so quickly and with just in the initial drawing, but really preserved a bit of the value that helped create that sense of form there. And his nostril doesn't come quite so low. And then we have the center of his nose coming down a little bit lower. And then it has some red at the very tip before it goes into shadow. So it's those subtle changes of color and value that are going to help describe that shape of the nose. It's not quite feeling roundish yet, but it will get there as I put some of these other shapes and colors in. Just getting little touches of color in my paint. As I'm mixing color, I can see which way I want it to go and keep on adding a little bit of different colors in it until I get to where I want it to be. Just getting that highlight on the nose just to start to see where it is. I can carve it over a little bit. There's another highlight on the bridge of the nose that has a lot more yellow in it. I can go a little bit lighter than that. And that's going to help create that cylinder shape that is the bridge of the nose. I don't know if in high school you've ever done um, in art classes where they have you um, with pencil or charcoal have you just draw a cylinder and that's lit on one side and you have to draw that kind of gradation to make it look round. Well, that's similar to what I'm doing here. So I finally get to apply what I learned in high school. Um, if it's the only subject I excelled at. Actually, I was pretty good at math and science. I ended up getting an engineering degree, but I really did like doing art more than anything else. At least when I was always a little bit stressed out when I was doing math and science, even though I was fairly good at it. But it wasn't like the same as when I was doing art. There was sort of a sense of home there where um, I felt like I had a little bit of control, or I could get at least a sense that I could control what it was that I was doing if I focused enough. And there was always a little sense of confidence there that I could do it. Just moving that highlight over just a little bit and then refining the edges of it, making it a little softer so it starts to blend in with the forehead. Okay, so we're about 40 minutes into this painting so far. It's starting to take some shape. Um, Let me see where I left off here. Um, yes, Frank Wonder, using all this white paint, it's making me think about my feet and the fact that my second to last girlfriend told me that they smell like cottage cheese. Okay, Frank, I was, it was pretty traumatic. Sorry, just a random thought. No need to respond. Well, okay. Azumaz says, while working off a reference on my phone, how can measurement be accurate? I mean, when the reference and the panel canvas aren't the same size at all. So first of all, if you're working off your phone, you want to at least put it somewhere. You don't want to be holding your phone. You want to put it down somewhere where the phone is facing you directly, um, meaning that it's not at a slight angle to your gaze, because then you start to have distortions in the image. And then you want to um, maybe keep it at a fixed distance from you so that any measurements that you take are constant. So if you're looking at your phone and you're saying, oh, okay, I can see, um, well, if your phone's an arm length, more than arm length away, you can use traditional measurement techniques where you hold your arm out and you cinch you place your thumb at a certain distance, and then you can kind of measure. Okay, from the eyebrow to the eye is here, and then you can start to take relative measurements. From that measurement, you can start to turn and see other parts of the face and take measurements that way. If you go on Proco on YouTube and you search for Proco, Proko, and measuring, he has a really good instructive video on measuring on there. It's very useful. It actually helped me realize that there was a couple things that I was doing. I was not that I was measuring wrong, but I was doing something that would give me less accurate measurements. And so after watching that video, it was really helpful to me for that. Especially he um, he brings his eye right to his shoulder when he measures, when he does this arm distance thing, and closes one eye so that no matter how you pivot your arm, you still are seeing the same relative distance to your hand. And so that was a very useful kind of thing. I'm going to bring this white shape just out a little bit further. So this is where I'm looking at the reference and starting to make corrections. So Azumaz's question is sort of like, for me, I have my picture of on my monitor. It's the same size as my painting, so, and I'm the same distance away from the two, and I can just look back and forth and see. I can visually compare. And when you have something that's on your phone and you're painting it much larger, that becomes a much larger challenge because you have to start doing some relative measurements, meaning that you once you get your shape of your head in and you decide how that big it's going to be on your paper, your panel, or your canvas, then that becomes one constant, and then you have to start making measurements of things that are in your phone. You have to say like, oh, well, the eyes are halfway between here and here, and this and the corner of the nose is one distance away the from the cheek, and if I take that same distance and I measure the other way to the other side, that will show me where the other edge of the cheek is. And you have to slowly work throughout the whole painting with those small relative measurements until you get the whole thing in. And then at some point in that whole process, when you start to lay in your shapes and that drawing is fairly right, then you can start to visually compare again. That you can see that smaller version on your phone, the head's tilted a little this way, and in your painting it's a little bit the other way, or the forehead feels too big to the rest of the parts, and you can start to see it. And then you don't have to do quite as much measuring, although sometimes you do have to measure to see it when there's something wrong and you can't figure it out. It is helpful to do a little more measuring to figure out what that might be, or use that toggle technique that I used in one of the tips where you overlay the photo over your work and toggle back and forth and see where the things are different. And that's when you toggle, you do have to resize the two, the photo and your artwork in your app or whatever application you're in, so that they are both the same size, so you can see that toggle effect. I think his ear has to go a little bit higher than I made it. It was too high, and then I made it lower, and then I made it too low. And then I do have to show where the bottom of the ear is. So that background I wanted to keep white, but it looks like it's going to end up being blue because I need to clean up all these outside marks that I'm making, and I want something to sort of be able to use to go back and forth with the locks of hair to get a little more dimension and interest going. Okay, and you see what I'm doing? I've been using the smaller brush for about 20 minutes now. I have to grab that larger brush now. And so, hope I answered your question. So temptation here is that I have almost all the white filled in, and the temptation is to take the paint that's already there and sort of smudge it around until I filled in the rest. And I'm not going to do that. This is where I have to show a little discipline. I have to go ahead and keep on mixing colors as I see it and put that in, and don't fill that white in until I have the right color on my brush to do so. Um, Otherwise, I am going to lose control of the painting by doing that, because I'm essentially saying the color that's already down there is close enough. I'm going to fill in these gaps and then I'm going to fix it somehow later. And it doesn't really work that well. So it's the best to keep on filling up your brush. So for example, this nostril here, I'm going to go ahead and get the right color on the brush and then fill it out. Then I'm going to come in from the other way and get that dark in there. And then there's a little bit of that darker red on the top of his tip of his nose up here. And I have to go a little bit whiter with the nose, just a bit. Let the texture of the brushwork, leave some of that, because that's what makes the painting start to be alive and exciting. That even if it doesn't match your resource, at least there's life there, there's evidence of the process. Believe me, I've had some people say, oh, why don't you smooth those things out, blend? But believe me, if you leave all that stuff showing, it makes for a much more exciting paintings that people want to see, try to understand what you're doing, because they see so much of the process. Yet if you do it right, and the photo, the likeness is there, and the feeling of the form feels realistic, but they see all that brushwork, that's, in my mind, that's like the best of everything that you can have in a painting. That's just a personal taste, but I get so excited when I see beautiful brushwork that's done, and then the actual rendering of the form is spot on. That is, I can look at those paintings all day and all night. So he has a little bit of the eye, the fatty brow um, tissue over his eye starts to bend under. So I need to make little indications that it's turning under there. And then we see a little bit of his upper eyelid peeping out here, and it's kind of a dark purple on the top of it right here. Not sure I'm getting that, but I can come, at some point I may come in with a smaller brush to nail that, but let's get define that cavity of the eye there a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and put these in. He just has a little bit of highlights showing. Sorry, I'm banging into my camera. He has just touches of highlight. Is that the brush that I want? No. I have this brush. It's a bigger brush, but it's just worn out until there's just a few hairs left on it. And so it comes right to a point. I don't know if you can really see that, but um, oh, why am I poking in the black? But it becomes useful for putting things like these really small highlights. I just get a touch of white on the tip of the brush, try to get just a little bit less on there, and I can just tap it, and that gives me a way of getting that in there. And I may decide that that doesn't feel quite right. I can play with it, but and I want to get another one of those lights right here. Got a little bit more blue in the paint, and since I have this nice detail brush here, I'm going to push out his eye a little bit here and see if I can get that upper eyelid crease a little bit more defined. Not every little bit of detail has to be rendered out to the nth degree. You can leave some things understated as long as it reads the way you want it to read. Um, because your brain just can't even take in all that information at once. Sometimes, uh, if you do photorealism, then someone's eye has to wander all around your piece to see how you've done each area. But but generally, if you're not doing photorealism, and even if you are doing photorealism, you can make your focal point have more detail and be harder edged and crisper, and then you can get softer edges and less detail as you move away. And that's a really great way of creating drama and getting um, making a statement, telling people where you want them to look. And in that way, you become kind of more like a director than of the artwork, as well as being the artist. You're not just copying a photo, you're creating an idea. Okay, so get a little more black underneath the nose, or dark, I should say. So there's quite a bit of red in that. And here I'm getting a little bit of a frayed marks from the edge of this old brush, and I'm going to try to keep that in. Sometimes those double marks or double lines start to be really interesting. I had one painting where I had a brush that was really chewed up like that, and a lot of my accent marks had 2 or 3 lines to them, and the effect was really nice. I just kept as much of that in there as I could. Okay, so I'm squinting down. The squinting is a real powerful tool. It knocks down all the details so you can see the larger general shapes and start to compare values and overall form more easily. So I can see, like, for example, this highlight's lighter and it's over a little bit more. And again, I want to make sure I'm coming in with new paint and bringing the new paint in, or it will start to look overworked and tired. Start to look at this distance. I have more of that blue and purple coming in a little bit closer on that side. And I need to get rid of some of that black that I have in there because it's not really there in the photo. It's a little bit of a darker colors in the ear in this one spot. Okay, and the cheek does come out a little bit further here, so I need to make sure I keep that. And it comes a little bit lower. So I'm looking for purplish red color here on the underside of the cheek. There's a little bit of reflected light there, which just worked out in that brush stroke. I see if I can keep that. A little bit of dark coming down from the corner of the mouth, and reddish color right next to that. I just like comparing and finding the little color shapes and putting them in as close to where I think they are as I can, and just building the forms out of that. Trying to keep the overall relative value structure right, meaning that a light in the forehead may be different than a light on the chin. So I have to keep, if overall the chin is a little bit darker, then I have to work on keeping that structure in the painting. There's my lower part of the lip. Got my lip coming in here and across. If I can do all that in one brush stroke, won't that be fabulous? Just as close as I can. And then I have the highlight sitting on top of that, which is sort of has reddish color in it. Okay, and the temptation is just take a bit of color and just smear that light area out, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get impatient here. Just going to slowly work towards it. Mix the colors that I see. And keep that little bit of highlight there. Darker red as it comes around. And a little bit of lighter edge here as it comes out towards the chin. Bends around, there's a little bit of pink in there. And then there's a light purple on the other side here. And then I'm going to have to carve in a little bit there, or actually I think this is a bit lower. So let's see if I can push that down. So, I was a little bit, I could get impatient, but what did it take? All of like 30 seconds to mix the color and put them in there. And I will adjust some of those, but at least it's close to being right. So I spent the time, not a lot of time, just a little bit of time, and it was worth it. Okay, just get a nice big brush stroke there, defining that side of the chin, coming up into the pink again. So let's get that color on the brush. Okay, so I start to ask myself, where is my drawing off? I think I need the rest of the hair shape to really start to see it. I'm not going to worry about getting the curls right. What I did with my initial painting was that I left the hair for last, and I was very careful to preserve the white of the paper around that, because that piece was done on paper. This other one, I can come back in with a background color and go ahead and adjust some of these. Just going to get a little bit of indication going of where things are. Just the feeling of it. It really comes up high in a couple spots here. Make sure I get this. There's shadows in the hair. His hair is black, but there's lights and there's shadows. And temptation is to not really pay attention to the shadows, and then you start to lose the shape of the hair if you're not careful. Okay, and okay, that no new comments. Okay, at least none that I see. Not had so much technical difficulty since I've set up my new camera setup. I used to have dropping off Wi-Fi service, and I would go in and out in the stream and lose people. And now this is a better setup. It's not dependent on Wi-Fi. It's using the cameras are plugged directly into my computer, and then it's streaming through Ethernet, or essentially directly through the modem. Yeah, Ethernet. It is Ethernet. Sometimes don't give myself, I don't have enough self-confidence that I'm saying the right thing, and I was. Okay. So that's the general shape of the hair. So if I look at his face, I'm looking at the reference. He has more of an angle here and an angle there, and it's starting to I'm starting to lose some of that. So, and then the cheeks come out a little bit wider. So overall, there's sort of this more of a pear shape to his face, with his cheeks pushing out so far from his smile. So I want to make sure I get that right. And I want to make sure that it feels like the top of his head there is moving back into space. Let's see if I can get the right color here. And just much tighter values there to get that the sense that the form is turning. Um, One real trick sometimes to get forms to move into space is to get those really subtle color and value changes that turn the form, and that may mean coming back several times with transitional colors that are colors in between colors to get to get that movement to work. So that's sort of what I'm doing right now as I'm talking. I'm getting some of those in between colors. You get a little bit of the hair coming down here. And now I'm starting to see more spatially as things are like closer or further back, trying to make a kind of more of a spatial mental map so that as I'm painting it, I'm thinking about where it sits in space. So I can start to really focus in on getting those spatial effects that are happening in the photo. You're not always getting those from copying the photo. Some of it has to come from you to get a little bit of understanding, to be able to see it visually and then try to create that effect. So usually when you're painting a photo, you're almost having to reconstruct it mentally. What you know about anatomy, what you know about the spatial effects that you get from the paint, um, what you know about different types of contrast that help move the viewer, the viewer's eye in and out of space. If you're just copying a photo, you're never going to get there. Well, you can if you blow the photo up and you copy it every tiny little mark, and you're keeping everything, you trace the photo so nothing moves, then all those effects are going to work. But if you're just painting alla prima, then you really have to know quite a bit more. I'm going to adjust, improve the shape of his eye right here. Just comes up a little bit higher in this corner. And then there's a secondary dark that comes in, reddish color, that's alongside of the nose. And then it softens, gradates out with a little bit of red. Okay, and I have a little bit more light here, which is going to give me the outer edge of the top side here. You should be able to start to feel the shapes, the nose. And then I can see I want that dark just a bit darker. It's like a touch of green in there too, right in this corner. That's a little too much green. But that's okay. Sometimes you need those little punches of color. You don't necessarily see them in the photo, but they add something the to the expression of the painting. Got to pull his mouth shape out a little bit further, or his upper lip shape. And we got a little bit of more of a light on this side. Okay, and want to follow the contour of the cheek here with that orange color, orange and red. And he has very subtle, but he has a dimple on both sides. So I want to get that. It's right here. That may be a little bit too strong, but I can come back in and knock it back a little bit. There's just too much going on still on this side. A little bit too much brush work. It's not clean enough, and it has some of the original panel coming through. Before I can get that dimple to read, I need to quiet some of this stuff down a little bit. Get it a little more accurate to the photo. So there's this nice orangey pink color that's coming in to the cheek along the side of the mouth. There's some bluish highlight here, a reflected light I mean. It's a little lighter and purpler. See if I can get my purple out. And then that dimple is right next to that. We have, oh, bumping into my camera again, sorry. I'm gonna cut into his cheek a little bit there. Then I'm looking at that negative shape. Shoulder comes right down here, the blue shirt, and then it drops, and then his shoulder is coming out a little bit squared off, and then it's coming back here. Okay. Alright, so I can move quickly in some parts here. I'm going to knock in some of his neck, some of his shirt, just to indicate, see where I am with the whole thing. I'm going to get quite a bit of safflower oil on the brush to keep this nice and flowy. I don't know if that's an actual word, but flowy. But adjective, I guess. If it's not, then that becomes my word. I made it up. Flowy. Touch of white, a little bit of yellow here in the shoulder. No, it's got to be redder. We have the shoulder blade coming in here. Red. And then we have underneath it, that's the top. The shoulder blade is here, pushing out. It's lighter on the top and gets a little bit darker towards the sides here. And then the chest underneath that, nice and red. Okay. And then this comes down and it goes purple, then black. Okay, and then I have almost black here on the far side, on the other side of the neck. It's a little bit of reflected light right there. And then the red, lighter red starts coming in. Let's plug that in. Got a bit of reddish orange. Just get a touch of white in that. Feel a little more white. Okay, and let's pull this highlight up just a little bit higher. Okay, so we kind of have the neck indicated there. And just want to mix the color for the shirt, which is going to be close to pure ultramarine blue, painted a little bit transparently. I want to get the intensity of the color, so I need the transparency to get that. See how vibrant that is? That's because when you work transparently, the color is created in two ways. One is that it's the light bouncing off the color, but it's also the white of the panel, the light bouncing through the color, bouncing off the white of the panel, and bouncing back to your eye. And that way it creates a really strong color. And it's about as pretty close to ultramarine blue as you can get. Okay, and I may have to soften that up a little bit, but it's a lot easier to go softer than it is to go more intense. Okay, got the color, the shoulder shapes. I had a shoulder too high to begin with. I want to paint around that highlight to begin with, just to quickly be able to see where it is. It goes into black, purple here towards the armpit, and all the way to black. So I can see the distance from his chin to this armpit there. It's really have it a little bit too high. I can pull this down a little bit, and you can see already I'm going to lose some of the intensity of that ultramarine blue if I'm not careful, as I get little bits of other paint in there. Okay, let's continue getting that dark in. And that's the form shadow of his arm too. So I have to be mindful of the shape of his arm and what's going on. Not just painting the shapes, but sort of seeing it as his anatomy. Okay, really trying the best. Even though I'm painting that really quickly, I'm also trying to get the values right by letting the paint on the brush tail off when I want it to be lighter, and having the strokes follow the contour of the form, so that as I'm just laying it in quickly, I'm starting to get the feeling of the form there, right down to his elbow here, and a little bit darker here on the top, and then it's catching a bit of light on the edge here. And make sure I get this shape right. It comes right into the shirt, and the shirt actually comes up a bit higher here. And we got a little bit of darker blue, oops, almost black on the shadow edge of the shirt. Gets kind of thin there. Okay. And the same with the other side. This is more in shadow. Okay, well, I left a big hole in his shoulder, so let's see if I can, oh, let's clean off my brush a little better. Okay, so the color you're seeing in the camera, let's see if I can fix this, is lighter. I'm going to open up my camera settings here. Just take a few minutes, a couple of minutes to do this. And I'm going to adjust the colors on my screen to match closer to what the painting looks like. And I can see that with, well, I already broke my palette view there, but it's the trouble with this little camera app, is it messes everything up. So here I'm going to go into the advanced settings. I'm going to lower the brightness a little bit. You're going to start to see it in your on your screen. And what else do I need to shift? I can add a little more contrast if I want. I think think that's too much contrast. But that's actually a little bit better. I can adjust the color balance. Can go more yellow or blue. Let's see. Is it letting me do it? No. I can go more yellow. I can go more blue. I'm going to go right. It's pretty close to where it needed to be with the auto white. Okay, I'm going to leave that. Okay, so I think just a tad darker. Um, yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so that's a little closer to what I'm seeing, assuming that your monitor is similar to mine. I have no way of knowing. And I'm going to close this and then readjust my picture a little bit. I think this got. Hold on. Just give me a second here, folks. Don't really have a. I don't have a crew here, so it makes it hard to adjust some of these things. Come on, do what I want you to do. I go through this whole ritual of getting this whole thing set up before each time I do this, and the app is it's a little bit clunky. Doesn't have undos. Uh, it's kind of jumps around. It doesn't kind of do what you expect when you grab onto things or make things bigger. So it takes a little while to get used to. So like, what's that doing? It's supposed to be constrained. Okay, it's constrained if I don't hold the shift. Okay, and we've got our palette back. Okay, I'm back in business. Sorry about that. Okay, so everything's adjusted. You see what I see. I have to get back to, I can see my reference, and back to painting. Okay, wasn't that fun? Whew. Okay, so uh, so I am skewing a little bit here, so I have to start looking across the form to see where apexes are of these shapes. So I need to pull this cheek down lower. Helps if I have the right size brush and I have paint on the brush. But yes, so pull that shape down lower on that side. And as it comes into the chin, has a hit of white in it right there. And I need to start to feel his expression too. I look at the painting and then I look at um, his expression in the photo and I start to see if they feel right. And usually it's something pretty subtle. You have to make some adjustments before things start to fall in the right place and you start to feel that expression and the right shape of the head and things like that. So I'm just comparing, moving small things around, um, make the drawing a little more accurate, come in where I need to with some transitional colors to soften some things up or to move something over. So this comes straighter across up here. It's a little bit of purple. Purple. Come on, purple. Just very light. That's too dark. Okay, so something like that. Yep. So his eyebrows need to come down lower in the middle. So it's little drawing things like that as I start to adjust them. Then if I don't adjust them, if I just pretend like there isn't differences and I don't do any of this adjustment, then that expression won't feel the same. The likeness won't look quite right. It's just through that process of adjusting that you start to get some of these things working. And it's really looking at subtleties. You want subtle changes in the painting to be the same as those subtle changes in the photograph. So if I look at the hair here, it actually, the forehead is darker in that spot. So you don't see that hairline quite as easily, but then it stops right there. So um, have the hairline coming down in a little bit more, and then comes around, gets very close to the eyebrow there. Not that close, so as I go push it one way and I've gone too far, then I have to go back and correct it. Come in with the hairline here, right on top of the ear. And I got some of these squiggles coming out. Okay. So if I keep on making those adjustments, and I can feel like overall his chin doesn't feel long enough. Feels like it's very prominent in the photo. Doesn't feel like it's coming down enough in the painting itself. So I can see that's an area um, I can just pull it down just slightly, not too much. I don't want to go too far, and it doesn't need that much, and it needs just a little bit of that darker color on the bottom to get there. And then I have to do the other things that makes that jaw feel a little bit bigger, which is pulling some of these edges of the face down a little bit further, making those highlights, some of them a little bit stronger, and pull this line out. Okay, and even the top of the head I need to make lower. So for this, I'm going to start to think about the background. I want to come in with a nice clean blue color, very light and clean. And for that I need to make some space so I have some clean area to work. And if I have to mix some of those colors over again, it's not such a big deal. I'm good at it. Okay, looks like if I'm looking, it looks like I dropped out for about 10 minutes on maybe not. Oh, and I have some more comments that I missed. Nope, no new comments. Oh, that was weird. It looked like I had a drop off between 10 and 10:10, but now it's showing the how many users were there. So it's about 10:30. I'm about an hour and a half in. I want to get a blue background. I'm going to use the what's it called? Phthalo blue. Nice bright blue. I'm going to mix a lot of it. And this is the color. I'm going to keep my background kind of flat, I think. I may decide to make a slightly darker area and slightly lighter and gradate a little bit, but come in maybe a little bit lower. We'll see. I may end up changing that a little bit. Oh, but I did that. I mixed this color so I can lower the top of his head a little bit. So I'm going to do that. So he just has a little more space visually at the top, even though some of his ringlets do go that high. But there's some spots that feel lower. And it will change the shape of his head, the perception of the shape a little bit once I start to put in some of that. Okay, so already I'm starting to feel a little bit of something that feels a little bit truer about it. Come back in. On top of that, so now I can start to work into this a little bit thicker paint. Get some of these interesting marks that happen. So, and I want to feel a little bit of tension in his cheeks that is happening from him pushing his smile out so far. There's tension here, his cheek pushing against, um, sort of pushing its out its on its limits. I can use some of that blue of the background right in the cheeks there because it gets a sense that it's reflecting that same color. I want to soften this transition in the cheek here. I can work back and forth between these colors a little bit. There, just get that a little bit softer. And here's an area where it's a completely different color than what I painted it, so it will help the painting to get it in the right value, right color. Okay, let's fix this eye of his here. Didn't really paint it ever, so now I am. And he has much more eyebrow. Trying to get some nice calligraphic marks here too, if I can. Those are the things that are going to work towards the finished painting, having some of those nice confident marks that you can just leave. And going deeper, darker in the crevice of that eye there. That goes red. So I have my quinacridone reds, very strong, cool, transparent red that I can just push really hard right there, and I want to add some to the other side so it feels balanced. And need a little transitional color here. Around that dimple. And that reflected light comes right into the eyebrow there. The edge of it. Let's see here, up here in the forehead, it goes a little bit darker than when I painted it. Here I'm just doing a little bit of blending, allowing myself. Go lighter, redder. Sometimes you can get kind of a nice blending effect if you pick up the brush and you make overlapping strokes, and each stroke has a little bit less of the paint and more picked up more of the paint from your canvas, and in that way each stroke you put down next to the other one is just a little bit closer to the background color, and then so it just sort of fade off that way, um, and that's sort of something I've learned over time. Sometimes you try things, and if they work, then you keep on doing it where needed. And that was one of the things that seemed to work for me. I could make much more abbreviated marks and not have to spend so much time uh, sort of exactly copying the transition of the values of the form. I'm having a hard time talking, but excuse me. Um, okay, now I can start to look back and forth very quickly between the reference and the painting and start to see where things are off a little bit. Make sure I get the right color on the brush. Got a little bit of a lighter red shape right above the eyebrow here, like it's glowing a little bit. Great. Okay, that's coming along. So want to get a little bit more of the area around the face in now. So the face is not that far from being done, but it may take me a long time to finish it because I'll very carefully um, make decisions about how I alter it to get to where I want to go. And it may have left some things out, and I may decide it's better with some of those things, not hyper rendering every little area, but getting the feeling right and the forms moving right is a different thing. Do you want to put a highlight right on the top of the cheek here? Really start to feel the light hitting it. Same with the other one. Didn't really put a light there, we just sort of left the panel coming through. And then I want a real nice strong one right on the tip of the nose. Really get that shine happening. We can have a little one right here on the chin. And then let's carve with the shadow that chin shape a little bit more. Extend that shadow down. Trying to be mindful of the shapes in the neck. Okay, this shoulder blade isn't looking quite right yet. Not feeling the tension in the right places. was going to silhouette those letters in his shirt, but I forgot to do it. So I'm going to have to come back in with white. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, partially because I have ADHD. It starts to get a little boring for me. So I'm going to move around to another part and then come back to that later. Let's get the rest of this shoulder in. And then just going to put thicker white right on top there in that one spot. And here's a spot where I can clean up a little bit with my background color. If I can get it light enough now that I put so much blue in it. I think that's not too bad, is it? A little more white. And I can have some interesting things going on with thicker paint in the background if I want. You can just come in, get really thick paint if I don't mind using the paint that way. So it gets a little expensive, but that's okay. Sometimes it's an interesting dynamic to have that thick background color against a thin colors in the form, and so you really feel that juxtaposition besides um, whatever might be happening in the photo reference. You can have sort of this play going on in the painting that doesn't exist in the photo. You know, it's those things that you won't be able to get if you're just going for photorealism. Um, if you're using a lot of primavera, um, alla prima, sorry, my brain, alla prima techniques going on, then you can get these luscious brush strokes that a camera really can't produce because they're not occurring in real life. You're using the quality of the paint as part of the interest in the painting. Okay, just getting some background in, and then I can start playing with the hair a little bit more. Slowly working my way around. Eventually, I'll get the whole thing done. Um, hopefully, I'm painting the background's a little bit watching someone paint a house. It's, you know, there's not a whole lot going on there. I'm just um, moving the roller into my zigzag shapes to get the whole wall covered. Okay, just speed it up a little bit. So I'm not going to have the bright white of the panel in my background color. I'm having this slightly darker blue, and that kind of changes the character of the image a bit, but that's okay. I may decide to put more color towards the top of the background and have it be lighter as it comes down. Something like that might be a little bit more interesting. And even though I haven't painted the arm yet, I can go ahead and put it in the background alongside of it. Okay. All right. Okay, we're almost about 2 hours in. Almost have um, most of the painting painted, besides any um, any alterations I may make to the face or the hair, or whatever. What I usually end up doing is I get the painting just about finished in about 2 to 3 hours, and then I'll spend another 2 to 3 hours refining the painting to get it to where I want it to go. It's kind of, for me, it's sort of, even if it's not evident from the brushwork that I've spent that time, because usually I'm not tightening up the painting. I'm usually just moving features around subtly, tightening the drawing up, while trying to keep the quality of the loose brushwork intact. And that just takes a fair amount of time. And I think when people see the finished work, they think, oh, well, gosh, that it looks like it was so easy for him to paint. Um, that almost looks like it just was done sort of right off the bat. And that is kind of the quality that I want the painting to have, but it's not that easy to get there. It's a little bit of a deception, and that's fine. I think there's a little bit of a myth around the better painters, that they somehow can do everything in just a few brush strokes, um, and I haven't. There's only a few people that I've seen that really can do that. Some people that I've seen that there's a little bit of appearance that they do that, but they do a fair amount of tracing the photo before they start. So um, it doesn't require that they do that kind of comparison to fix the drawing as they go along. They just already have that part done through tracing. Um, However you might feel about tracing, it's kind of controversial. I made a video about it on YouTube that you can find, that I talk about drawing and tracing, and kind of have a strong opinion about it. But um, and my opinion, partially my opinion, is there's a place for tracing. Um, what I didn't like is that a lot of people um, that are that teach art in their YouTube videos and in Instagram, and they teach mostly the painting part of their process, and they don't show you anything about the drawing part. And it's usually because, and you can tell by looking at the drawing that they're starting from, that the drawing has been traced, and for one reason or another they decided that they don't want to show that to people. And I think it's fine if um, your painting videos are just pure entertainment value, that people are watching you paint. But if people are trying to learn what you're doing, and supposedly you're trying to teach them how to do it, but you're hiding a big chunk of the process because you don't want to show it or talk about it, I think that you're in a way, you're doing a disservice, and that kind of bothers me. Um, there's other people who trace, they're very open about it. It's part of their process. Um, it may be a necessary part of their process to get the kind of effects that they're looking for, and more power to them. It's like, well, I use photos, and I'm not going to begrudge um, the fact that I'm not going to hide the fact that I use a photo to paint. But there's other artists that think that you should never paint from a photo. Um, and some artists hide the fact that they work from photos because that there's sort of this stigma about it, and it's, hey, it's like whatever works for you kind of thing. And for me, I like working from photos. I'm going to continue to work from photos. I know how to paint from life, but it's costly and time consuming and inefficient to always have to set up a model to do a painting. And so I like working from photographs. I've learned to paint well from photographs, and I like it. making a pile of paper towels here as I work. Just keep on cleaning off that brush. Let me see where I may have gone wrong with some of that drawing. So this earlobe is going to be lower here. I can bring that down a little bit. Okay, get a nice, interesting brush effect there. I may try to leave that in if everything's in the right place. May try to do some of that in some other places where it might work. Trying to get a nice feathered edge to the brush stroke. It helps lead the eye around too a little bit. Let's pull this upper edge of the chin up a little bit tighter to the shadow, which means that that lip has to move up just a little bit. Okay, there. Restate the highlight that's on the lower lip. Okay, I lost a little bit of that accent on the upper edge, so let's do that again. And I need to punch that shadow again. Okay, not getting the right color there. Okay, missing a lot, think I have the right color in the brush and then putting it down and it's not right. So have to work a little bit slower to get that. Okay, there's a lot more transition here. The lip, it's a little bit softer. Got to pull the edge of the upper lip up here a little bit out. Okay, just going through, seeing colors on here, trying to match them, trying to get the overall form to feel nice and nice and youthful and smooth and dimensional. as that larger form on the forehead turns under, it's going to leave a little bit darker color right here. That darker color extends up, turns to purple. Not so dark. Okay, starting to get the pieces falling together. Okay, a little bit of lettering practice here. Okay, it's a mystery what the shirt says. It clearly says I'm, and then it says something else. I don't know. Could be anything. I think there may have been other photos where you could see the whole shirt, but I don't remember what it said. Okay, let me see. Mariata? I'm having a hard time reading my screen. Eyes are a little blurry. Mariata Flores art. Hi from Brazil. The painting is looking awesome, AJ. Thank you. Haven't really moved back from it that much to really start to see it. Get a little bit of darker purple here. It was getting a bit too light. Then we have a reflected light right here along this edge, and I can bring that shadow up a little bit higher. Give him more of that crisp edge to the cheek, crisp turn. And then more dark in the shoulder here, leaving that very subtle highlight. It's there. Just need to paint dark enough around it. Get a little bit of alizarin permanent in there, a little bit of the dioxazine purple, and keep on pushing that darker. Kind of take out a little bit of the white that's in there. Do have a little bit of highlight in the other eye. That's going to really help balance it Not sure really quite what's going on in there. I think that there's a little mark where the white of the eye is. It's like right there. And then there's a highlight sort of more towards the side. And that's about it. Gonna work on the shape of that eye a little bit. You can barely make out where his eyelid is, and then where the bottom of where the eye cavity is, something like that. And then the corner of the eye comes out a little bit farther, and then it sort of fades out, kind of uh, ghosts a little bit. Let's get this purplish red dark color here in the ear. Go a little more purple, I think. And then the same here. I'm going to lose that beautiful edge there in the ear, but maybe I'll try to leave that. Just come down a little bit on the inside there. And I'm going to straighten out that edge. I've made it a little bit too articulated more than it is. I just wanted to straighten that out a little bit. Okay. I want to punch up this there a little bit, and he's feeling nice and shiny and new. It's kind of the direction I wanted to go in. Get sort of this sparkliness of the light reflecting off of his skin. A little bit of shadow that comes up that side. Yeah, that's a real tough kind of mauvey red color to hit on the lower lip. Let's get that light to come down a little bit lower. Okay, so now I can start to refine things a little bit that I see, especially where there's lots of difference between the painting and the photo. As I fix a lot of those things, then it will, even if the paint's loose, again, that you can have loose brush strokes but have a tight painting. And that's by making it adhere much closer to the reference in terms of the underlying drawing, but you can leave really the painting very loose. So I made this dark mark here, but it's much subtler in the photo. So I may try to just knock it back a little bit, or decide that it works and leave it, one or the other. Okay, trying to get this neutral color that's coming down in here. Get some of the transitional color of this highlight. haven't used very much yellow in this at all, so hopefully I haven't gone too cast too blue. Sometimes it happens if I'm not deliberately adding yellow. Okay, and these contours I have to continually work back and forth until I get it in the right spot. It's just one of those very subtle things. You know when you get there, but it's never right the first time. Okay, now I can start thinking about some of these squiggles. Really want the character of them. I don't want to copy each one. So kind of look as I paint one, I'm looking at one that's up there to try to get the same kind of feel. Then we have these that kind of go off into space a little bit. And again, trying to get some of these alla prima effects to work. I have one thick color that I'm coming in and painting into. And hair is one of those things that painting hair in oil paint is one of the nicest things because the paint itself tends to really want to um, speak the language of hair. I don't know how else to say it, but kind of make the same effects, same marks. Okay, this mark I made earlier made it a little bit higher than what I wanted, but okay, this is where I have to come in a little bit tighter to the head. So a little cleanup work. And it's okay. And this shows that you can have some thick paint and paint over it, knock it out, clean it off, whatever you need to do, and you can get back to another color. Just you kind of get used to the paint characteristics, and then you have a lot more control over what you do. It's going got a little black in there, so it's making it look more purple. So if I want, I can come in with um, the phthalo blue, push it in another color, and another hue. I just ran out of white paint. Let's see if I got more laying around here. Okay, got 6 of you still here with me, which is good. Um, you got Mariana, Marietta. It looks like Mariana. Marietta Flores says, I also wanted to thank you for sharing your work and experience. You inspired me to start doing commissions, and I'm so grateful for that. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Um, you, I'm curious whether you have commissions already or you want to start doing commissions. Either way, sounds great. Um, yeah, I've only been doing commissions now for really for 2 or 3 years, and had to get my work up to a much higher standard before I could really start to get commissions. But I've been advertising my work on Etsy, and that's been working out pretty well. Let me drink a little bit of water here. And you can see, you can look back at that painting I did 3 years ago. It was okay, but it's not to the level really that people expect if they're going to hire you to do a commission. They may like the painting, they may like the style, but they also want you to be able to get a likeness. They want you to have a sense that you have um, much more control over the paint itself. And um, so it does take a bit of work to get there. And so it's something that I decided that I wanted to do. Um, I was more that sort of fallen in more like this is the kind of painting I want to do, and I want to do it for the rest of my life. And if I get commissions in the process, then that's great. But I also knew to get those commissions, I had to work pretty hard to improve my work quite a bit, which it's a lot of work, but I don't mind doing it because I enjoy the process of painting. Sometimes I think the only time I only get really frustrated is that if a commission is taking longer than I would like, and I would like to work on more other things. But overall, painting a commission feels very similar to me of just painting, doing my portrait studies. I'm just sort of, I get into kind of a zone, and it's very comfortable, and I just paint and just tune out the rest of the world, and I like it. Okay, something weird's going on with that highlight shape there I have in the shoulder. I don't have the values um, soft enough, the changes of values, so I have to come in with a little bit of white um, with the color to knock down some of the transparency that's happening there. Okay, that's starting to look a little bit better. Get a little bit of the red that's coming up, and move that highlight a little bit higher. And then we have that dark edge here. It's looking a bit better. Let's kill that. Okay, I'm not going to get that same level of vibrancy in the ultramarine blue now because I've painted in that spot too much and then losing the transparency of it. Which is fine. It was really bright to begin with. There's still some spots that are really strong. But if I want this to feel like fabric, a shirt that's draping, then I have to get rid of some of that transparency. So I get a little bit more control over the values. Transparency, you tend to see every stroke or every streak in the paint, and if you go opaque or semi-transparent, then you can start to clean some of that up. That's sort of what I'm starting to do right now. Just getting a little bit of white in the paint. Okay, got a little bit of green in there. I decided that wasn't a good move. So start fresh. So a little bit of white in here. And the fabric is moving across this direction. Okay, so it's about 11:30 or 11:20. I want to paint on this shirt just for about 5 minutes more. Then I can start to evaluate the face, take a look at um, if there's a way I can just finish it, or if it needs more work. Really come in with that almost pure black right here to get this all pushed back darker. And I'm missing the dark on the top of the shoulder there. Okay, again, I want to push almost black here in his armpit. Okay, so I'm looking to see whether the gesture feels right, and feels like his shoulders are just a bit too high. So I'm going to carve in a little bit. Just lower those ever so slightly. Because otherwise he's going to feel like he's got not hunched shoulders, but shrugging. You know, the kind of expression where you pull your shoulders up to your ears, that kind of gesture. And that isn't what I want him to have. That's not how the gesture he has in the photo. So just by dropping those a little bit, I can get what it is that I want. I think that's looking a little better. Okay, so let me clean up this I am just a little bit. Get some of the spatial effects with the lighter and darker blue, or lighter and darker white, whatever it is. Okay, this doesn't have to be perfect, and this is a great place to show some of that brush work. Okay, so on back to the face, see if I can nail this. I can see I need to work on the teeth a little bit. There's some transitions that I want to make a little more transitional, like right in here, so they don't look quite so streaky. Still want to see the brushwork and I want to see the paint. I just don't want it always to be a hue or a value difference. Sometimes it's just a textural difference, or you just see a slight change, but you can tell that the paint itself is thicker or is moving across the form. Okay, that looks good. Come in, really punch up this highlight here. Isn't that gorgeous? And then want the same thing, but I want a little bit of color towards the top here. A little bit of that. I can go even pinker. Get a touch of that quinacridone red in it. Yep. And then a little bit softer on this side. And then I'm going to give it another hit of white. Just keep on laying it in there. Really make it, build it up. I can do the same thing in some other spots, really get thicker paint or the feeling of brush movement. Really want that color that's in that side of the mouth here. It's a beautiful color. I really want to emphasize that. Got a little bit on this side too. Okay, improve the shape of the edges a little bit. So it's just really looking and making subtle adjustments, really trying to get the forms to turn the same way they are in the reference. So you feel the anatomy, you feel the tensions and the forms in the face. But I don't want to paint everything. I do want to keep it understated if I can. So I'm close to that point where I'm in danger of going too far. Okay, that was a little darker than I thought it would be. I mean, a little lighter. It's okay. Get a little bit bluer right here. Okay, I think what's going to make this work is the teeth, getting the teeth right. So everything else has about the right feel, besides this eyebrow right here, but everything else. this light in the center. I need to pull it over just a little bit. There we go. I think that did it nicely. And then the same with this one. Just pull it over just a little bit. Okay, that's starting to look good. Okay, so a couple things bothering me. I want this shirt to be coming around, so I just need a little indication that it's there. Same with the other side. A little indication of the shirt. So now it's all about orthodontics at this point. So let's see if I can get this to work. Okay, so it's about small little indications. Let's pull this lip over just a little. Wrong color, but kind of a lighter purple. And then this part is red. And I have this smaller brush, so I have to be careful that I don't start doing the whole painting with that. Yep, let's just do that one stroke with a different brush. It's just taking off a little paint though. Okay. Okay, a little more attention here in the lip. Getting it drawn out to the sides. Okay, we're at 11:30. I'm going to work 10 more minutes, I think, and then it's either going to be done or I'm going to call it a night, but then work on it more at some other point. Soften up this here. So edge control becomes really important in this part of the painting. If you have not enough soft edges, it just looks too raw. And if you have too many soft edges, it just looks, I don't know, it starts to look kind of amateurish. Because you can go soft very easily by blending everything, and that just sort of never feels quite right. Okay, don't think that highlight is quite right on the lip yet, but maybe it needs to be lower. That just totally feels worse. Yep, that just looks like a big glob of paint that I just accidentally put down. It's not feeling right at all. So let's blend it in a little bit after I talked about not blending too much. Okay, so the teeth, back to the teeth. Okay, so I got a little bit of very subtle grays that are separating the teeth. It feels like it needs some of those in there, as long as I can get them in the right spot. And it needs a little bit of the darks that are accenting. It's a little bit of a dark red that comes in between the front two teeth. It's a little bit of a dark around the edge. Okay, we got that. His eye tooth a little bit longer right there. So I need a nice clean bluish white. Make that longer. And we see the shape of the tooth because of the dark gum that's coming down behind it. And then the rest goes into darkness. Okay. Continue to move that lip up just a little bit higher. And the same on this side. Okay. Let's get a little bit darker red on the tongue. Okay, what's going to make the teeth work too is not just trying to paint them light, is to really look to see where there's highlights, reflected lights on the teeth. That'll give them the right feeling, the feeling of the right material, sort of the shiny enamel. Mariana Flores says, sorry, she may have posted this a while ago. I've got 4 commissions so far, and I'm surprised by it. I was too afraid to offer them before. I asked a question about photo references. I think you didn't see it. Um, uh, I'll have to look back. Let me see. Uh, Let me see. I have a question. When working with commissions, do you explain to your clients um, what you need from a photo? I've just started doing commissions, and one of my clients only had a really tiny picture. Yes, I often let them know if a photo isn't sufficient quality. I'll let them know. Sometimes I've had to turn down commissions that the photo is just not good enough to work from. Sometimes I'm able to get inventive by pulling a couple photos together and getting enough detail from a face of one photo and the body of another to be able to do the work. Um, but it's, for me, it's kind of a deal breaker because I'll spend so much time trying to invent something that's not there. It becomes very difficult if I've worked from bad photos before, but there's some photos that are just not even possible to work from, and I'll let a client know that up front. Um, you can just tell, like you can't even tell like what's a nostril and what's a shadow and what's where the form is. You're just seeing a bunch of grainy dots, and you can't make out much else of the photo besides that. I had one guy, he had a 50-year-old photo of his mother that he wanted me to do a painting of, and it was just a terrible photo, and I was just like, I just told him I couldn't do it. Anyway, I didn't know if you're still there listening, but a, so if you are Mariara, hope you got the answer to that. Otherwise, I'll see if I can find you on Instagram and send you some of that information. Or you can watch the end of this video and find it. Um, Sorry for the strange throat noises. Just getting a little parched here as I work. Let's get a little bit of water in. Okay. So where is this falling apart a little bit? Because I'm just gonna do like 20 more strokes, and so I want to fix whatever seems to be the most off. Let's just pull that ear up a little bit higher. This feels like it needs it. This other ear is kind of vague because it's really feathered, but I don't want it to feel like it's too low, so I'm going to knock some of that off. Okay, I'm missing a little bit of coarse shadow right here. Let me see if I can mix the right color. It's just subtly darker. Comes down. Yep, lost the color. Follows the form here and then turns. That's nice. I like it. Got a little bit too much white in that stroke. Let's mix it out. Get a little bit of red in there. Needs just to be subtly lighter. Okay, that feels good. Really want to feel the cheek being squeezed there. So this little bit of dark comes out a little bit further and then bends down. Okay, this side feels like it's just out too far. So I'm going to pull it in a little bit. Okay, just little adjustments. If I do enough of them, then at some point it will just feel like it's gelling. Thanks for everything. This is um, Marietta. Thanks for everything. Turned out okay in the end, but my client didn't like the fact that I wouldn't be able to paint from that picture. I felt bad, but I'm glad to know it wasn't wrong of me to tell her. No, you have to in the beginning of the commission, you are setting the terms with the client. You have to do the best job you can of letting them know what's going to work or not. The worst is taking the commission and then not being able to do um, to pull it off. And a lot of times you kind of knew that you weren't going to be able to, but you just wanted to do the work. And those are usually the jobs that you either need to turn down or you need to be really frank with the client. Part of doing commission work is really that customer service piece, and you really um, clients always appreciate it if you're just really honest with them, even if it means turning down the work. In some cases, I've um, referred work to other artists because it just wasn't what they were asking wasn't close enough to my the type of work that I do that I feel comfortable with. Either they wanted me to do larger paintings with lots of people, or working too small, or working from photos that weren't good. In some cases, someone wanted me to do a painting with 12 or 13 people in it. In the end, I just told them that that wasn't the kind of work that I did. And so, in the end, I was glad that I turned it down. Let's get some of those little patches of light coming into the hair here. And and those curls, somehow I need to get a couple of those really tight um, curls coming through, even with that little big brush that I have. Let's see if I can grab the little brush and see if I can get some of those. There we go. And these kind of go off into space a little bit. Got some purple marks in here that sort of blur out the edges of the mouth a little. And I feel like the teeth still aren't quite defined enough. So maybe I can make a few marks that'll make a difference here. Oh, I really didn't finish the bottom teeth either. I'm almost getting it. It's almost there. Still not quite feeling the amount of tension in the cheeks that I see in the photo. And that's because I think this just comes out just a little bit further. His cheek shape. Even if I end up exaggerating it a little bit. Just want it to feel like it's pushed out far enough. Want his forehead just to feel a little bit tighter in contrast. And I know I always make foreheads a little bit too high, so I'm just gonna come down a little bit on here. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna finish at midnight, and that's it. I think I've lost quite a few of you. Maybe I've gained a few more. Um, and Marietta says, yes, thanks again. Okay. Um, yeah, just if I can get some cleaner edges to just a bit more of the teeth. There's a bigger tooth that comes down there. And a little bit of a space. And I just need to punch this a little bit darker here. I don't think it's quite that dark in the photo, but it does feel like it needs it. And I'm missing the gum line here. Was feeling a little bit off without that. So I think I have to go back a little the other way. Okay, need a clean brush. And so now I'm left actually painting each individual tooth, not really where I wanted to get to, but to get the right feeling of his teeth, I need to do a fair amount of that. Yep. I knew the teeth in this one was going to be a bit of a challenge, but just clean that up. Okay. So 5 minutes to go. 5 minutes, I turn into a pumpkin. Pull the edges of his mouth up a little bit higher. Oh yeah, I forgot. I wanted to get that nice red that was at the bottom of his chin here. Okay, well, it's 5 to midnight. I only have a few of you left here. Um, I'm pretty pleased with this. I may do a few more touches before I call it done, but I do need to get to bed. And so, thank you all for joining me. Hope those who are interested in joining the 100-day portrait challenge do so. If the ones that are in the challenge now, keep on going. You're doing a great job. I'll keep on sending you guys tips and making suggestions. And I hope to do this again next week. I did it pretty steadily last year, every week like clockwork. This year, not quite as much, but just because the commissions have been breaking up my time a little bit. Uh, but I try to do this every Tuesday night. So look on my Instagram page to see when I'm going to do it again. And if you subscribe and hit the notification bell, then you will get a notification when I am live. Um, and thank you all. You're great great supporters of mine. I thank you very much, and have a good night.